My father ignored me my entire life and only loved my younger brother. Years later, I succeeded in tech without his help, but what I did with my money left everyone speechless. I'm 32 years old. I work as a software developer. And honestly, I need to tell this story because I've been carrying this around for years. And every time I see my younger brother on social media living his best life with our father's unconditional support, something inside me twists. It's not exactly envy, maybe a little bit, but it's more complicated than that. It's like my entire childhood was a black and white movie while his was in Technicolor, you know what I mean? And the worst part is that we grew up in the same house, with the same parents. Well, technically the same parents, but in reality, they were two completely different experiences. Let me backtrack a bit so you understand where all this is coming from. When I was a kid, let's say between 5 and 13 years old, my father Edward basically didn't exist for me. And when I say he didn't exist, I'm not exaggerating or being dramatic. The guy literally wasn't present in any aspect of my life. I played baseball in the town's little league. I was pretty good, actually. And my mother Victoria was the one who went to all the games, screaming from the stands, recording my at-bats with that old camcorder we had. My father never, and I mean never, went to a single game. Not one. I remember once asking my mom why Dad didn't come, and she gave me one of those adult answers that don't mean anything. Something like he was very busy with work or that he wasn't really into sports, which is ironic considering what would happen later. He didn't go to my award ceremonies at school either. I won the award for Best Science Student in 4th grade. I was super excited because I loved science, especially everything related to computers and technology. And I remember being on that stage looking for him among the crowd of parents and only seeing my mom clapping like crazy. My father got home that night around 9. I was already in my pajamas, and when I showed him my certificate, he just said something like, "Oh, that's nice. Congratulations," and kept watching TV. He didn't even look at it properly, like he didn't even pretend to be interested. And look, I was a kid. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I knew something wasn't right, that there was something wrong with me or with our relationship. The most serious thing was when I fell off my bike and broke my arm. I was like 11, I think. My mom rushed me to the emergency room. I was screaming in pain because the bone looked weird, all twisted, and she was pale as a ghost, but trying to stay calm for me. She called my father from the hospital, and he said he couldn't come because he had an important meeting. A meeting. Important. His one-year-old son with a broken arm in the hospital, and he had an important meeting. My mom didn't complain to him at that moment. She never complained to him about anything. But I saw something in her eyes that day. A kind of deep disappointment that I never forgot. Then Logan came along. My younger brother was born when I was almost 5, and I swear it was like someone had flipped a switch in my father. Suddenly, Edward became Father of the Year, but only for Logan. You understand? Like the transformation was so obvious that even I, as a small child, noticed it. When Logan started walking, my father recorded him all the time with that same camera my mom used for my baseball games, but which was now exclusively to document every moment of my little brother's life. When Logan started talking, my father would spend hours and hours playing with him, making funny voices, laughing at his babbling. And as Logan grew up, the difference became more and more evident. Turns out my brother inherited my father's love for sports, specifically for football, and that was like the golden ticket for him. My father became his personal coach, bought him all the most expensive equipment, took him to practices. They went together to watch professional games. They spent all their time talking about strategies and plays. It was like suddenly my father had discovered how to be a dad, but he was only interested in being one with Logan. What hurt me the most was seeing how my mom tried to balance everything. Victoria was amazing. Honestly, she tried to compensate for my father's absence by being twice as present with me, but you could tell the effort it took her to keep the peace in the house. She never directly complained to Edward about his favoritism, at least not that I heard, but there was tension, a tension I could feel even without fully understanding what it meant. Sometimes I'd hear her crying in her room when she thought we were asleep, and I knew. Somehow, I knew. It had to do with how my father treated me versus how he treated Logan. Family dinners were torture. My father and Logan talked non-stop about football, about which teams were going to make it to the Super Bowl, about the statistics of this or that player, and my mom tried to include me in the conversation by asking me about school or my friends, but it felt forced, like she was desperately trying to maintain some kind of family unity that didn't really exist anymore. I spent my time moving food around my plate, counting the minutes until I could retreat to my room. Then the worst thing that could have happened to me happened. My mom died when I was 13. Ovarian cancer. Everything was very fast, like in 6 months she went from being fine to being in palliative care. Those 6 months were horrible, watching her deteriorate, how she lost weight, how the treatment left her exhausted. Logan was 8, and I think he didn't fully process what was happening, but I did. I understood perfectly that I was losing the only person in the world who really saw me, who valued me, who believed in me. After she died, the house became a cold and empty place for me. My father was devastated. Obviously, they had been together for like 18 years, but his way of dealing with grief was to get even more into his relationship with Logan. I guess he needed something to hold on to, something that gave him meaning, and that something was my younger brother and his developing sports career. I was there, also grieving, also destroyed inside. But nobody asked me how I was. Nobody noticed that I stayed up all night crying. Nobody realized that I had basically stopped eating properly. I took refuge in the only thing that made me feel any kind of control: technology. Since I was little, I had been fascinated by computers. But after my mom's death, it became a complete obsession. I spent hours and hours learning to program, watching YouTube tutorials, reading forums, doing small projects. It was the only thing that managed to get me out of that dark cloud I had over me all the time. While my father and Logan were in the backyard practicing passes or playing catch, I was in my room writing lines of code, creating small programs, feeling that at least in that digital world, I had control over something. By the time I was 16, I learned several basic programming languages, and I was working on a project that had me super excited. It was an application. Nothing technically impressive. But for me it was huge because it was the first complete thing I had created from start to finish. I remember spending weeks perfecting it, fixing bugs, improving the interface, and in a moment of, I don't know, naive hope, I guess, I decided to show it to my father. I waited for a quiet afternoon. Logan was at football practice with his teammates, and my father was in the living room watching some sports program. I sat next to him with my laptop and told him, "Hey, Dad, I have something I want to show you. I've been working on this for a long time." He looked at me kind of annoyed at interrupting his show, but I showed him the application anyway, explaining how it worked, what it was for, all the work it had involved. I spoke fast, nervous, hoping for, I don't know, some kind of recognition, some sign that he cared even a little bit. When I finished my explanation, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the screen, and then he said, in that flat voice he used with me, "But I don't know why you get into those things. Computers are for nerds. You should be outside exercising or something useful." And he went back to watching TV. Just like that. I sat there with my laptop on my knees, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world for thinking he was going to care, for believing that maybe, just maybe, he could be proud of me for something. I closed my laptop and went to my room without saying anything else. I remember that night. I sat in the dark, thinking that no matter what I did, I was never going to be enough for him. I was never going to be Logan. I was never going to share his interests in sports and traditional masculinity or whatever it was he valued. And you know what's the saddest part? I stopped trying after that. I completely gave up seeking his approval because I understood it was useless. Things came to a head when I was approaching high school graduation. I wanted to go to college to study computer science. I had good grades. Not excellent, but good enough to get into a decent state university. The problem was money. Obviously. My parents, well, my father, because my mom was no longer around, hadn't saved anything for my college education. When I asked him if he could help me with tuition, he got all uncomfortable and told me he didn't have money for that I would have to look for scholarships or student loans. What destroyed me was that literally 2 weeks after that conversation, I heard him talking to Logan about how they were going to hire a private football coach for him, which cost like $200 an hour or something that ridiculous. Logan was barely 13, But my father was already investing absurd amounts of money in his sports future, buying him specialized equipment, paying for expensive summer camps, everything. But for my education, for my future, there was nothing. I confronted him. I think it was the first and only time I really stood up to him. I told him, "How is it possible that you spend all that money on Logan but can't help me with college? This is my future, my career." And he answered me something I'll never forget. He told me, "Football is a safe investment. Logan has real talent. He can get a full athletic scholarship or even play professionally. Your computer thing is unpredictable. It's just a hobby. I can't spend money on something that doesn't have a clear future. Doesn't have a clear future. My ambitions, my passion, everything I had built on my own without any support from him, didn't have a clear future, according to Edward." I got so angry I couldn't even respond to him. I just stood there looking at him with a mixture of hatred and pain I had never felt before. And in that moment, I made a decision. I told him, "You know what? I don't need your money or your support. I'm going to manage on my own, like I had to do." And I left the house. Technically, he didn't kick me out, but I basically left because I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't stand seeing the toxic dynamic of that broken family. I called Sharon, my mom's older sister, my aunt, the only person in the extended family who had always been kind to me, and I told her everything. She lived in a small apartment about an hour away, worked as a secretary at an elementary school, and didn't earn much, but she told me I could stay with her without thinking twice. My father didn't even try to stop me. When I went to the house to pick up my things a few days later, he was watching a game with Logan, and he just looked at me and said, "I guess you've made your decision then." I just nodded, packed my clothes, my computer, my programming books, and left. Logan gave me a kind of awkward hug. I think he didn't fully understand what was happening, why his older brother was leaving, but I didn't have the energy to explain it to him. Living with my Aunt Sharon was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time. Her apartment was tiny. I slept on the living room couch, but she treated me with a respect and affection I hadn't felt since my mom died. We talked for hours about my mom, about what she was like before getting married, about her dreams and hopes. Sharon told me things I didn't know, like that my mom had always been worried about how my father treated me, that they had had arguments about it, but that she never wanted to force the situation for fear of making things worse. When it came time to pay university tuition, I was in total panic because I didn't have anywhere near the money needed, and student loans didn't cover everything. One day I came home from work, because I was working part-time at an electronics store to save whatever I could, and my aunt sat me down on that couch where I slept and told me she had talked to some of her friends from work and that together they had collected money to help me. She showed me an envelope with like $3,000 in cash and checks. I started crying right there. Honestly, I couldn't help it. These women who barely knew me, who earned teacher and secretary salaries and similar jobs, had put their own money to help their friend's nephew go to college. My own family, my own father, hadn't wanted to give me a cent, but these near strangers were giving me a chance. I promised my aunt that I was going to pay back every cent, with interest, someday when I could. I entered State University to study computer science and basically became a machine. I went to classes during the day, worked part-time in the evenings, and at night I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning working on side projects, learning new technologies, building a portfolio. I had no social life. Zero. My classmates went out to parties and I was on my laptop coding. But I didn't care. I had something to prove. Not so much to my father anymore because honestly I had removed him from my mental life, but to myself. By my second year, I was already doing freelance work. Small things at first, fixing websites, making small applications for local businesses. I started earning decent money, enough to help my aunt with rent and start paying back what she had lent me. She didn't want to accept it at first. She said it was a gift, but I insisted because I needed to feel that I didn't owe anyone anything, that everything I had was through my own effort. In my 3rd year of college, one of my professors connected me with a startup that was looking for junior developers. That's where I really learned how the industry worked. I worked on real projects with real users, and that's where I came up with the idea for my own application. Something that had been germinating in my head for years, but that I finally had the skills to execute. I spent my entire last year of college working on that app while completing my classes. I slept like 4 hours a night, drank dangerous amounts of coffee. I was probably destroying my mental and physical health, but I was possessed by this need to succeed, to prove that my father was wrong, that what he called a hobby with no future was actually the real future. By the time I graduated, I had a working prototype of the application. I had gotten some beta users who were testing it, and I had started talking to potential investors. It wasn't anything huge yet, but it was mine. It was real, and it worked. I graduated with honors, got a job as a full-time developer at a medium-sized tech company with a salary I wouldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams at 18 when I left my father's house. I haven't spoken to Edward since I graduated like 5 years ago. Sometimes Logan sends me messages. He's 22 now and still playing football in college with a partial scholarship. Irony of ironies, my father didn't get the full scholarship he so anticipated. Logan is a good kid. None of this is his fault. But talking to him reminds me of everything that happened, and I prefer to keep my distance. My aunt says my father asks about me sometimes, that he's proud of what I've achieved even though he would never tell me directly, but honestly, I don't care anymore if he's proud or not. The app I worked on during college eventually sold to a larger company like 2 years ago. I didn't become a millionaire or anything dramatic, but it was enough money to buy my aunt a small house, pay all her debts, and make sure she never has to worry about money again. When I gave her the keys to her new house, she started crying and told me my mom would be so proud of me, and that meant more than any recognition my father could have ever given me. I work remotely now. I earn well. I have my own apartment. I keep developing side projects because it's what I'm truly passionate about. Sometimes, I wonder what my life would have been like if my father had supported me, even a little bit, if he had shown even a minimum interest in what I was doing, but then I think that maybe all the pain and struggle was what made me who I am. I'm not grateful for the rejection or anything like that. It still hurts when I think about it too much, but at least I can say I made it completely on my own, without his help, without his approval, and that has its own value, I guess.